Our last speaker is Dr. Gauri Kundu, consultant cornea and refractive surgery from Narayan Nethralaya, and he's going to talk on a very difficult topic, diagnostics to evaluate an unhappy refractive surgery patient. So we look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you, Dr. Chitrani Ives, for giving me this chance. I'm just trying to share my slide. Is it visible?
You're sharing, yes, it's visible.
Sure. So just before we move on, I think there was a lot of discussion on types of surgeries and, the role of biomechanics. I think Pooja spoke very well on it. There were certain questions. I just want to take 10 seconds. There was a lot of talk on the type of surgeries and, doing contralateralized studies and predicting ectasias. And that's where the role of, FEM modeling, finite element modeling, and AI comes. You don't really have to do studies. We've already started looking at retrospective data, not only from Indian cohort, but also from across the world. And this is still in beta testing where, we are trying to look at which eyes across countries, across continents, based on preoperative stiffening and postoperative predicted stiffening change can lead to ectasias. So I'll move ahead to my talk on diagnostics to manage unhappy patients. I have tried to concise. There's a lot to cover on that. I have no financial interest at the outset. So a lot of patients come to us. I think Dr. Shail spoke very well on the role of aberrometry in trying to decode these kind of unhappy patients. You have a lot of patients coming with glare, halos, blurring of vision, asthenopic symptoms. What is important is that you need to categorize and, sequentially analyze these patients. Okay, it's not a broad term looking at aberrations or just looking at tomography, looking at biomechanics. It's important that you look right from the precorneal, the tear film, looking at the epithelium. You then look at the cornea, look at the role of lenticular aberrations, look at internal aberrations, and then obviously move ahead to look at, problems with the retina, and obviously an aspect of asthenopic symptoms, the role of accommodation, which can lead to us giving clues as to why these patients are unhappy post-refractive surgery, and a whole new dimension on personality and, their outcomes post-refractive surgery. So, there are a lot of causes. If you're looking at regression, if you're looking at glare, the most common, something which normally we look at is obviously a deliberate undercorrection. There will be a cohort of patients who do present with post-refractive surgery ectasias. You need to look at ablations, whether it's centered or decentered. Just an axial, progression or a progression of the myopia, that is also something which is very important. And obviously the role of epithelium and epithelial changes and remodeling, which was covered in bits and parts during our discussion today, that also plays an important role. And accommodation and, spasm of accommodation and the role of, integrating the, assessment of accommodation in our refractive practice is something very important and can decrease the number of patients who are actually unhappy post refractive surgery. So an approach would be obviously taking a detailed history, visual assessment. No doubt, you need to look at a thorough visual assessment. You do a cycloplegic refraction as well. Look at clinical ocular surface examination. You obviously have an important role of tomography, aberrations. Dr. Shail spoke very well on it. Epithelial mapping, axial length or biometry documentation, the role of lenticular aberrations or internal aberrations, and obviously orthoptics. And the last aspect would be on personality. So, when we are talking about the precorneal tear film, a lot of patients do come with dry eyes post-refractive surgery. It's important for us to assess, them at the outset. Now, what is also important is, that in addition to the routine history taking and the visual assessment, and thorough ocular surface assessment is something which is very important, whether it is what Dr. Chintan spoke about, the basic dry eye evaluation. Yes, also an objective assessment of, the meibomian gland functioning, which could give us a clue as to the ocular surface health, which could be actually leading to problems of vision post-refractive surgery. That is something which we need to remember. The picture which I've showed you here is something of, it's known as the, the optical quality analysis system, which looks at, the precorneal tear film. It also looks at the scatter at the precorneal tear film. So even if patients do not have, clinically discernible dry eye based on cutoffs, they still might have, clinically significant visual complaints because of increased scatter of the tear film. That is something which is very important. And we need to rule out precorneal tear film changes, dryness, prior to then actually moving ahead and assessing other causes when we're looking at unhappy patients. Now, majority of this would obviously respond to treatment. For the want of time, I'm not going to go into details regarding how we manage these patients. I think pupil, there's no doubt regarding the role of assessment of pupil. This is again something beautifully covered by Dr. Shail in his talk, where pupillometry, if you're looking at the various sizes of pupils, and also the role it can have, if you look at the point spread function and the scatter in relationship to the various pupil sizes, this is something which is well known, and it's important to keep this in mind, that even pupil and pupillometry needs to be assessed while we're looking at patients coming with these complaints post-refractive surgery. So we are looking at dryness, we're looking at pupillometry. It's also important to do a thorough examination in terms of a topography. You're looking at a tomographer. Pentacam is the most common one. Remember, centration and decentered ablation itself can cause significant glare and halos if you're looking at post-refractive surgery patients. It does create topographical irregularities. This leads to irregular astigmatism, can cause impaired vision, glare and halos. This is something which is very important for us to remember while we're trying to evaluate patients who have, presenting with these complaints post-refractive surgery. Now, an important way to, look at where exactly the problem is, obviously you're looking at eye trace, where it does give us a clue as to where the problem can be localized, whether it is corneal, whether it is internal. Remember, internal is not necessarily lenticular, but it's predominantly lenticular aberrations. We have published this paper which looks at customized laser vision correction for irregular corneas. I don't want to be going into too many details, but doing a contact lens trial, if there's improvement, it's predominantly a corneal related problem. If not, it is generally internal high order aberrations, and that is something which a tool like an eye trace can help us in dealing as to where exactly the problem is. Now, what is also important is a sequential way of assessment. This is something we have published, which looks at first looking at the centration, whether it's a decentered ablation, whether it's a small cone. Sometimes you get a central island. Once you look and arrive at this diagnosis from the corneal tomography, you then can move ahead and trying to delink whether it is corneal, whether it is higher order aberrations. And this is a sequential or a stepwise assessment of patients who do come with glare and halos post-refractive surgery. Now, another important aspect which is sometimes goes missed is epithelial mapping and epithelial remodeling and stromal remodeling. Dr. Rishi spoke very well on the role of epithelial mapping in refractive practice, is sometimes missed. Obviously, there is a lot of literature on epithelial being the cause of regression post-refractive surgery, and what Dr. Praveen has spoken about is a normal epithelial remodeling, which generally happens post myopic correction or hyperopic correction. But what challenge lies is especially in cases which there is an exaggerated or an abnormal epithelial remodeling. And what is important for us to remember in these cases is that invariably there would be other factors. You need to look at inflammation, chronic inflammation, control that abnormality of film. You obviously need to assess the meibomian gland functioning. We do have a confocal microscopy where the nerve health is directly in relationship to the epithelial and the epithelial remodeling. So prior to planning any other treatments, enhancements, you need to look at epithelium remodeling, whether it is normal or whether it's an exaggerated response. And if it's an exaggerated response, try to look for clues as to why it could be so, especially clues or indicators suggestive of chronic inflammation. And that is something which is very important for us to understand when we're looking at epithelium as a cause for patients presenting with these complaints post-refractive surgery. Invariably, these are the patients who present months to sometimes years. They, in the immediate post-operative period might be, having very good vision. And generally, because it is inflammatory and these kind of changes take place, a lot of time, it is a slow process. So that is something which, should ring a bell when we're trying to look at epithelial remodeling. So treatment, again, you're trying to look at treating inflammation. First, treat inflammation. That is something which is very important before taking a call as to how do we move forward in these cases. Now, I have done a thorough history. I've done a ocular surface examination. I've done aberrations. I've done a tomography, epithelial mapping. It's normal. What else can be a clue? And that is where you need to, obviously, it's sometimes missed. many of us do not actually document, the axial length prior to refractive surgery, and just an axial progression or an increase in the axial length, post-refractive surgery, that could also be an important role as to, an important clue as to why there is regression, why there's patient complaining of visual disturbances post-refractive surgery. Now, I have all of this normal, and what do I, look at next? Now, we have published extensively on the role of, accommodation in patients presenting with, either preoperative evaluation or unhappy patients post-refractive surgery. A lot of clues can hold true if you're trying to look at role of accommodation. How do we look at that? Now, what is important is something which Dr. Shail has already spoken about, is the role of, the corneal aberrations, or, the corneal aspect of the eye trace is normal, but there would be a lot of internal defocus, a lot of, disturbances in the internal, aberrations on the eye trace. That could give us a clue as to where exactly the, problem lies. Also, there is a subset of patients who we have treated and, they have undergone the refractive surgery, but they're still kind of very unhappy. Eye trace, and in fact, even Pentacam gives a very useful tool, which gives us and looks at, scatter in terms of the lens. Lenticular changes, sometimes which is not clinically discernible on the slit lamp, that could be actually causing the, changes. And by treating the cornea, we would actually be burning our hands. So dysfunctional lens index, which includes pupil size, which includes internal higher order aberrations, also an aspect of contrast sensitivity, is an objective way of assessing the lens functionality and scatter in the lens. And I think people will be aware of DLI between 1 to 10, anything nearing 10 is normal. Generally, anything which is less than 5 is abnormal. And this is in a broader term, something known as a dysfunctional lens syndrome, where especially, what kind of treatments we actually want to advise these patients. It's very important for us to understand that there can be a subset of patients pre-presbyopic. These are the patients who complain of a lot of glare and halos. What do you exactly advise for these patients? And here it is important for us to, distinguish between where exactly is the foci of the disturbance, whether it is corneal or whether it is internal, predominantly lenticular. So that is an important aspect. Now, accommodation. 1 minute remaining, sir. Yeah. Accommodation is also something which is important. There are a lot of patients who, come with a lot of either it's known as, positive fusional vergence, negative fusional vergence disturbances. If you're looking at convergence insufficiency, excess, or accommodation insufficiency or excess, these are the kind of patients who, like I spoke about the role of eye trace, maybe an higher internal defocus or a higher amount of internal higher order aberrations. It can give us a clue as to there may be a possibility of an accommodation related problem. And therefore, at least a basic evaluation, which is a near point of accommodation, a near point of convergence, preoperatively can actually help us in filtering out a lot of patients who can have these kind of complaints, especially post-refractive surgery. So this is a patient who, presented to us with blurring of vision in the left eye. If you look at the point spread function of the cornea, it's very good. But look at the internal point spread function. We did an orthoptic evaluation. This patient, in fact, did have an accommodative excess, and post-treatment, post-exercises, the patient drastically improved. So there is also an aspect of personality. This is something we've also published where, majority of personality traits can also hold a clue. So there are a chunk of patients, everything is normal. I'm not saying this is the first thing you need to jump into, but this is something you need to remember. This is a patient who comes to us. He's having glare halos. We evaluated. Everything was normal. Whatever I told you sequentially on evaluating patients who are unhappy was normal. But when we dwelt deeper, this patient, in fact, had a lot of things happening. If you're looking at a panic attack, the patient was insomniac, he was sleepwalking. Now, obviously, this is not something which a patient would open up with. This obviously happened over a period of time where we evaluated the patient and gradually opened up. And it's in these kind of cases where an assessment of personality, which could trigger an accommodative spasm or issues related to that. And that is something which is very important for us to assess. Remember, you can't directly send a patient to a psychiatrist from an eye hospital. Normally, what we talk about something known as a neurobiologist, subtly set it in that, everything else in the eye is fine. You might need, certain other assessments. And this is something we have published where, personality plays an important role. Now, I wanted to end by saying that, there is a case where everything else was normal. The patient had normal accommodation. Everything else was normal. The tomography was normal, a well-centered ablation, no accommodative-related problems. Epithelial was perfect. We looked at the retina. This was a normal fundus. OCT was normal. But surprisingly, this is courtesy Dr. Poona Chandra, retina consultant with us. Patient still complained of halos and glare. And when we dwell deeper, he deals with a lot of cases with ERGs. We actually did a multifocal ERG, and this patient had decreased central responses. And this actually, was missed in various other places. This was a case of, a subclinical macular dysfunction. And that is what was missed preoperatively. And the patient actually complained of persisting glare and halos postoperatively. So remember, the key is always compartmentalize, sequentially look at what you're trying to look at, whether it's the tear film, whether it's the epithelium, we're looking at the cornea, you're looking at the lens, looking at accommodation, you're looking at obviously personality. And then, there is obviously a small chunk of patients where it could be a missed retinal cause. So thank you for your patient listening, and thank you for the opportunity again.
Thanks. Thanks a lot. It's always said we keep the best for the last, and you just covered absolutely everything which was possible case of an unhappy patient. I'm going to ask 3 questions. Kumar, you disappeared and you've reappeared now. So,
so Kumar will face the brunt now.
But yeah, now how late would you, post PRK haze, would you try treating with topical steroids is one question. Another simple question is, when would you decide to do a laser touch-up for a post-phakic IOL? How soon or how late would you do for any residual error? And the third question is, for a retained smile lenticule, how late would you advise that a person to intervene to remove the lenticule? These are the 3 unhappy situations which I want to answer. Kumar, Dr. Merle, all are your thoughts. Post PRK, how late can we think of trying topical steroids?
You have to unmute, Kumar.
He wants to stay muted.
I normally give steroids, the low dose steroids, for almost 3 to 4 months. So first I give the PRED for 1.5 months, I taper it off, and then I give FML or Lotipred for 3 months. And UV protection sunglasses. I've had one patient who went to Goa for more than 10 days, did not wear UV protection, came back with white dots on the cornea, which had surface treatment done many years back. As far as the retained lenticular smile, I don't think you can wait. You have to do it immediately. So you have to make a flap on it and remove the retained lenticule if there is no other way. That's my thought on that.
And for the phakic IOL, how soon can you think of doing a laser?
I've done phakic IOLs, and some of them do have sometimes some residual error, like a 0.5 and a 0.75. But I've never done a surface treatment for them. They're quite happy as it is because you've treated more than 95% of the number. And some of them don't mind wearing a 0.75. So I've never done a surface treatment on a phakic IOL.
So to these questions, Dr. Merle, Ramurthy, Namrata, any other difference in thoughts?
Praveen, maybe we feel like saying ditto as Dr. Kumar.
Praveen, for post-PRK haze, when would you think of trying?
Yeah, I think Praveen should answer that.
Yeah.
I think for post-PRK haze, at any time point, I would always try steroids, just because of the fact that it is the easiest thing to do. And I don't think we'll lose very much. I'm not going to talk about the treatment protocol, but anytime you see haze and the patient was not on steroids, for a short duration, I will always try them.
And for the smile lenticule removal, how late would we risk to intervene?
I don't think it matters. I think just like a LASIK flap, a slime smile lenticule, you have an interface that is made. I think that's going to stay that way. So whenever you see the patient, whenever the patient wants, I think if you remove it, I think you should be able to remove it without a problem.
Yeah.
I think just a couple of thoughts. I mean, if it's a retained smile lenticule is what I'm suspecting, I always like to have a look at the laser firing in that particular case. If the laser passage both in the lenticule cut as well as the cap cut has been quite normal and everything has been normal, and subsequently the basically the problem has been with the way the lenticule has been removed. Invariably, there is a left out fragment. And I do find that the ASOCT sometimes helps. And I also use this triamcinolone acetate in the interface that sometimes delineates the retained lenticule. The faster you do it, the better. You don't really, if you suspect it, you don't wait indefinitely. But there have been instances when we have done it even 1.5 months after the primary procedure has been done. And as regards your PRK and Hayes, of course, I think it has already been said. And as regards your third question regarding phakic IOL and when you do whether you do a laser touch-up, yes, we have done it quite often. Initially, we started out with phakic IOLs, which did not have a astigmatic correction. So small cylinders, we had to address it on the cornea. And nowadays, sometimes if it's malposition of a toric IPCL or an ICL, we always try to correct it by positioning it properly. But if it's a residual error that's left over and the cornea can take it, touching it up on the surface of the cornea, usually about a couple of months after the primary procedure is done, does pay off good dividends, just like you touch up on a multifocal intraocular lens patient.
Yes. Anybody has any other question before we conclude? I think it has been a great meeting. I think I should come up with my concluding remarks. I think it's been a fountain of knowledge, and if we had discussed all the questions which myself or Praveen would have had we had the time, I think it would have been a truly even greater webinar than what it has already been. We had great set of speakers and expert panel. Some of them disappeared and came and went, so I started. That would be dealt with seriously later. But it was truly a wonderful webinar, and my thanks to my co-moderator, Dr. Praveen, for being always there, coming out with just the right answers when some questions were left answered. My thanks to my ARC team for always encouraging me to do more and more webinars with all of you. Our thanks are due to Kripal and the entire ARS administrative team for always being there for us, and always a smile in their voice when they try to sort our issues out with ARC, and of course with Namrata Sharma always there. Sai and Anjula from Numerotech for their constant support. Dr. Anand Sethi and his team, which I'm sure all of us have realized they're so very supportive at all points. And my deep thanks to Entor for always being our constant sponsors for all the programs. I don't even check with them, and they're always there. And finally, and most importantly, our thanks to our attendees for tolerating us, for coming back to you again and again with so many webinars. I do hope and believe that this continues to be a platform even beyond my time, because I do think that this is one thing where people can go back and hear later, even if they have not had the time to hear during the webinars. Thank you very much, one and all of you, for making it a great success.
Thank
you, Chitra. Thank you for doing it. You know, webinar after webinar, doing such a great job and getting everybody on the platform and great discussions.
And maintaining the enthusiasm. It's amazing, man.
Yeah. Always so energized. Yeah. Even when we are, you know, in our this thing, Chitra is always energized.
Thank you very much. Thank you.